Foundation training. I'm going to walk you through some of the fundamental principles, introduce a couple of movements, and this will give you the foundational understanding of how to go into the small routine. So let's get into it. In foundation training, there's essentially two fundamental premises that you need to understand. And this applies to pretty much 90% of the postures. The first is anchoring, the second is decompression. We take anchoring and decompression breathing to every pose, and during that pose we continue to refine the anchoring and refine the decompression breathing. So what is anchoring? It is a way to start muscularly activating the lower body in such a way that you can think of it as anchoring the pelvis. And if we anchor the pelvis and start using our hips the way the hips need to move and get the pelvis into a position and anchored, we can then use our breath, our decompression breath, to expand, elevate, and decompress the upper body. I give people the kind of conjectural thought process of we anchor the pelvis so that we can use our breath to elongate the spine, expand the ribs, and if our pelvis is anchored, remember our spine comes off of the sacrum, part of the pelvis, we can use our breath to essentially think of pulling each vertebral segment a millimeter apart. But we can only do that because we anchor the lower body. So what is anchoring? First off, if I stand with my feet straight forward, this outsides of my feet they form a V. They point outwards. What we want is the outsides of my feet to be parallel. So I'm slightly internally rotated. You see that? My feet are here's straight forward, outsides of my feet are a V. Here's turned in so that the outsides of my feet are parallel. It does some important things at the acetabulum where the femoral head sits into the socket. It slightly internally rotates it. It's to potentiate the glutes and hamstrings. So I want you to slightly turn in so the outsides of the feet are parallel. And right now your big toes are just touching. From here I want you to put a bunch of weight onto the ball of the feet. And now shift back to weight in the heels, almost to the point where you feel back like you're going to fall back. Go back and forth with that just a couple of times. And I want you to get the feeling of settling into a good 50-60% of pressure through the heel, and then the other 50-40% through ball of big toe, ball of pinky toe. You can see my toes are lifted up, and then I let the toes float down. So 3 points of contact with the foot. Center of the heel, ball of big toe, ball of pinky toe. Not the tip of the toes, the ball. So from that position, I now want you to think about the knuckle of the big toe start squeezing towards the opposite foot. It's as if I'm trying to take the ground and squeeze it inwards. I don't collapse. I stay stable and I squeeze in. I want you to start as if you're trying to squeeze the ground in, keep pressure through the heel, ball of big toe, ball of pinky toe, and squeeze. You should start feeling adductor tension, groin, inner thigh. That's what we're chasing, okay? So let's take the feet about hip width apart. Outsides of the feet are parallel. Find the center point of heel, ball of big toe, ball of pinky toe. Get some weight into the heel, 50-60%. The other 50-40% is through the forefoot, ball of big toe, ball of pinky toe. I want you to think about picking your arch up towards the pelvis, up towards the crotch. What it's getting is this posterior tibialis muscle involved. And we're going, think of lifting up as if you're trying to pull the ground upwards. And now we also add big toe, knuckle, pulling towards opposite heel. So it's almost as if I'm making this crisscross of tension. Lift the floor and now pull that big toe towards the opposite heel. It's almost as if my thighs are slightly pulling internally. It's not collapsing. I'm structurally stable. but I'm drawing in and up. You should feel groin tension, right? Lift the toes off the ground. Think of pulling the ball of the big toe towards the opposite heel, and it's coming from here. Here. And now squeeze hard, and you should feel a whole bunch of adductor tension. Cool? We're getting the premise of what anchoring is. Go wider. This will let you really feel it. Lift the toes off the ground, spread them apart, and keep them up in the air. Find pressure through the heel and ball of the foot. Let's get centered. Good. Center of heel, ball of big toe, ball of pinky toe. Now, with the toes off the ground, I want you to pull the knuckle of the big toe towards the opposite heel. It's this crisscross, as well as lifting the arches up towards the groin. Now let those toes float down. And now squeeze as if you're trying to pull the ground in and up. And if you squeeze really hard, it should even start coming up into tension of this lower abdominal, this intrinsic core, because those adductors are connected fascially into this lower abdominal. Good. That is anchoring. Okay, we're going to get you. We're going to add on to this as we progress. Now I've gone shirt off so I can show you decompression breathing. It helps to get a visual. What I want you to think about is your rib cage is a lampshade, okay? And we are trying to inflate that lampshade backwards, forwards, and to the sides. So we're trying to take that lampshade as if it was a balloon, expand it in all directions, and then lift it away from the anchored pelvis. What it is not, and we are surfers, and you can especially see it in me, I'm easy to be in this position, right? So if I think of this lampshade rib cage, it is not flaring only the front of the ribs, because what it's just done is tip the back of the lampshade. That is not decompression breathing. That is creating compression, and that is what we do on a surfboard. We are trying to undo that. It is expanding the ribs, all directions, and then lifting it with breath. So this is what's difficult, and this is what takes time to get familiar with, because it's a very different sensory experience. So what do we need to know? Thumbs on the rib cage, literally finger on bone, and pinky on the front of the ASIS. It's this pointy pelvic bone right up front. You should feel bone. So I call them shakas, okay? Shaka, thumb on rib, pinky on the ASIS, anterior superior iliac spine. Those are two bony landmarks. If I do a good decompression breath, my shaka lengthens because I'm lifting the rib away from the pelvis. The key with decompression breathing is that as I exhale, I keep the height and the length of that shaka. I do not exhale and decompress. I do not exhale and compress. That is where it gets difficult. So let's start figuring this out. Shakas, okay, thumb, pinky on pelvis. Think elbows wide, okay? Nice proud chest. Chin back, as if I'm pulling the base of my skull back and up. There's a rope pulling the crown of my head to the sky, and if something smells terrible in front of my fingers and my chin's a little tucked, that's what we're after. I just elongated the spine. Now, big breath in, and then lift the rib cage, expand it. Good, I keep the height. Now as I start to exhale, I fight to stay tall and I fight to stay expanded. I do not, that is not what we are chasing, okay? It is a controlled exhale. I generally lightly hiss, and with that hiss, I create a little bit of lower abdominal tension by thinking of pulling my belly button away from this belt line. It is not a full exhale. If I fully exhale, ribs collapse, I come into flexion. It is a controlled exhale where you are fighting to stay tall and stay wide. Just for close-up's sake, decompression breath. Thumb on ribs, pinky on pelvis. Inflate all directions. elbows wide, chin back, chest up. I've elongated my spine. Notice I keep the height. It is not, see how my ribs just collapsed? It is fight to stay wide, fight to stay tall. It is not a full exhale. Breathe the balloon in all directions. You see the height and the width I'm fighting. I can come into sphere of tension. Now I can feel breathing into the back of my ribs. As if I'm trying to breathe my ribs. Think of it as a balloon and I'm breathing it backwards. I'm staying that big, wide lampshade. Think of the base of your lampshade, that bottom rib. You're trying to breathe it away from your pelvis. It's not compressing. It is lift that bottom rib up and away. Let's give that a go. Feet about hip width apart, toes slightly turned in. We're not going to anchor yet. Don't worry. Thumbs on ribs, pinky on pelvis. Chin back, elbows wide. Big breath in. Fight to get tall, shake it up a little if you need to, and now start to exhale. Controlled exhale, keeping the height, keeping the width. Breathe in again. Get wider and taller. As you exhale, you are fighting to stay long. Your spine is being elongated to the skies. As you exhale, belly button tension. Breathe in again, get bigger and wider. Make sure your shakas are staying long. Keep going, 2 more breaths. Chin back, elbows wide. And shake it out. It's this awkward sensory experience of trying to be as tall as possible, breathe as wide as possible, control the exhale, draw on the abdomen. It's all these different things that you are now trying to combine. It will get better with time and the more you do it. What makes me better at this than you is I have just more familiarity and experience, so I can coordinate those things. And as I'm holding a posture, I am scanning from head to toe. Can I anchor? Can I change weight dispersion? Should I pull hips back? Can I lengthen? Can I relax the neck? Can I elevate the spine? You will get there. So we are going to combine these positions into a standing decompression breath. There's one other thing you need to know. If I bring my hands in front of my pelvis, right? Think of holding a cantaloupe. For you Aussies, the rock melon, right? Big. As I'm doing that, I'm squeezing my fingers together with about 1 pound of pressure as I pull the palms away from each other. It's this kind of similar to what we're doing with the feet with anchoring. In this position, I want a little more pressure with the pinkies than the thumb. If I go thumb heavy, fascially, it goes into bicep, anterior deltoid, chest, scalenes. If I go pinky heavy, it goes more tricep and lat. This segues, if I'm paddling, should I be going paddle stroke thumb heavy where it goes bicepy, delty, necky? No, I should be paddle stroking pinky stroke essentially to fascially and neurologically activate lat triceps. Segue there, beneficial. So in this position, pound of pressure or a kilo of pressure squeezing the fingertips together, little more at the pinky, and I want you, inner elbow, I'm going to call this giving blood. Inner elbow, we want up towards the sky, okay? This drives external rotation at the shoulder joint. It is not in, it is up. And the key, this is a sphere of tension. I can go sphere of tension here, I can go sphere of tension here, but it is lightly more pinky pressure, about 1 pound or a kilo of pressure, okay? Secondarily, as I'm decompression breathing, I'm not doing this. I'm elongating the spine and the shoulders are long for the ride. I'm not pulling myself up with my neck. I'm lifting myself up with my breath and rib cage and the shoulders float. So often you're going to hear me say relax the neck because as soon as somebody does a decompression breath, they're here, oh my gosh, they need to keep the height of the spine and relax the neck. All right, let's start putting this together into a standing decompression breath. We're going to do 2 foot positions. First foot position, big toes touching, heels apart, outsides of the feet are parallel, okay? Find your foot pressure, about 50, 60 through the heel, ball of big toe, ball of pinky toe. I want you to slightly soften the knee and pull the hip back. It is not knees excessively forward, hips come back about 2 centimeters, maybe an inch, okay? Light anchor, lift the arches up towards your crotch and pull the big toe towards the other big toe. Shakas, okay? Light anchor, 20, 30%. And chin back, chest up, elbows wide. Big inhale into the lampshade. And as we exhale, we control. Good. Maintain connections. I'm anchoring. Check in with your anchor. Pressure through the heels. As I hiss my exhale, I'm pulling my belly button away from my belt line, and then I'm breathing into the lampshade above that belly button tension. Float the hands in front of the belly button to a sphere of tension. Keep decompression breathing. Elongate. Expand that rib cage in all directions. Float the hands up in front of the heart. You're still anchoring, maybe 30, 40% tension. Breathe, expand. Good, float the hands up diagonally off of the forehead. As you exhale, relax the neck. Hiss out, check in with that belly button tension. 2 more breaths here. Lift the crown of your head to the sky as hard as you can. Anchor the pelvis away from the crown of the head. And relax and shake it out. Woo! That's decompression breathing. We can do this in many different positions. Okay, let's now go feet hip width apart. Slightly toed in. Good. Shakas. We're going to be able to anchor a little harder here in a sense. But think and keep in mind, I can anchor and decompression breath at 100% tension, or I could do it at 30% tensions, right? So 100% is more of like this heavy kind of strength emphasis, whereas 30, 40, 50%, it's more subtle, and I can focus on other things because it's not as intense. How's the alignment? How's the breathing? Alter the intensity so you can more subjectively experience the sensations and make subtle changes. If you're cranking down, everything's bracing. It's not a bad thing to crank down, but we also need to work on the subtlety. Feet hip width apart. Weight in the heels. Ball of big toe, ball of pinky toe. Squeeze the ground towards each other, and it's coming from the hip joint. The hip joint squeezing in, and big toe towards opposite heel. This slight internal rotation. It is not collapsing the knee. Knees stay stable. Put a little pressure in that heel. Soften the knee, soften the hip. Just a little. Chin back, chest up. Big decompression breath. Think your ribs as balloons and they inflate backwards. Pull the bottom rib away from the pelvis. Crown of the head lifts to the sky. As soon as you got some height, float the hands in front of the heart. Give blood. That inner elbow is up towards the sky. Chin back. Can you pull the crown of your head away from the anchored pelvis? Keep decompression breathing. Expand. Expand the ribs, elevate them, elongate them as you exhale. Chase that belly button tension. Connect that belly button tension to your anchoring tension. Float the hands up a little higher. 2 more breaths, elongating as much as you can. Check in with your anchor. Check in with the belly button tension. Are your shoulders relaxed? Can you pull the chin back a bit? And shake it out. That's decompression breathing. There's variations of decompression breathing, but we've now started to experience anchoring, decompression breathing, combining them into a standing decompression breath. We make this into a founder exercise by standing decompression breath, hip hinge back. What it is not is a knee forward chair pose. Shins need to stay mostly vertical and the hips pull back. This loads the posterior chain. This is a deadlift, this is a kettlebell swing, this is learning how to use the hip joint as a movement center of the body rather than What we as surfers need to watch out for is we hip hinge back. It is not a, I call this J-Lo butt, right? It's like Instagram in a thong, like showing, it is not hint. It is stable spine, pulling hip back. So let's turn this into a founder. I'm going to do this slightly sideways for you. I'll go this way. Feet hip width apart or slightly wider. Okay? Feet slightly turned in. Weight through the heels. 50-60% pressure through heels. The rest through ball of big toe, ball of pinky toe. Start to find a light anchor. You're pulling the ground in and up. Think of that ground pulling in already starts to lightly pull that hip back a couple centimeters. It's not knees forward. Chin back, chest up, elbows wide. Big decompression breath. Good, let's get some height. Shake yourself tall. Breathe that lampshade in all directions. Good, hands float in front of the heart. Think of giving blood, a little more pressure of the pinkies. Give blood at those inner elbows. Big decompression breath. Check in with your anchor. Now in one fluid movement, you're going to anchor harder and pull those hips back as the chest comes forward like you're trying to look over a cliff. Perfect. Check in with that anchor. Pressures through the heels. Give yourself a big decompression breath. Your eyes are looking about 8 to 10 feet, maybe 2 meters, 3 meters in front of you. It is not kinked up. Elongate that spine, float the hands up a little higher, anchor a little harder, and pull those hips back so I can decompression breath the crown of my head and ribs away from my tailbone pulling back. If you're good here, relax the neck and float those hands up a little higher. Now we work to connect everything. Pressure through the heels. We're anchoring. Big toes pulling towards opposite heel. Can I pull my tailbone back a little more? Can I inflate my lampshade ribs even longer and then pull the crown of my head away from my tailbone? Relax the neck as you exhale. Can you inflate a little bigger? Let's ramp up the tension now. 2 breaths. Pull hips back. 1 more, elongate that spine and stand up and out of it. And that is a founder. So you've learned how to anchor because all these, we're essentially connecting from foot up to pubic symphysis, the center of the core, lengthening and strengthening the hamstrings, and now decompression breathing to expand a torso that is too used to being compressed, right? We can be compressed this way, or as surfers, we hyperextend and compress that way. And so we've combined anchoring and decompression breathing into decompression positions, into exercises to strengthen the posterior chain. That is a founder. A founder can be done feet together, feet hip width, feet super wide, right? We start layering in all these other arm and hand positions into advanced foundation training, but the premise, you can start implementing even, I'm sitting on my surfboard, right? Sitting, getting things reorganized, fascially and muscularly connected and controlled, breathing, creating space back here where I've overcompressed. And it's all about making these fascial connections, right? The foot connects to the knee, to the hip, to the spine. And it's all about these fascial connections and maintaining them, connecting the foot to the hip, the knees in between and nice and stable. Hamstrings are long and strong, glutes are strong, supporting the low back, connecting that up into the shoulder, externally rotating. That's why it's such a powerful exercise, and it's so good for spine health because we're undoing all of this. I'm going to show you one other drill. Supine decompression breathing. So this is a good way to experience another sensation of standing decompression breathing. This is great after a lot of surfing. Knees bent, heels apart, about 8 centimeters, maybe 4 inches. Big toes together, and I've pulled my feet up towards my knee. Shakas. I can use the ground now to kind of get myself tall, chin back, chest up. I want knees squeezing together, big toes squeezing together, and lightly pulling the heel into the ground up towards the body. It's not pushing up, it's pulling up. You see how it kind of pulls my body down a bit? That's getting those adductors and hamstrings really fired up. Good. Let's get that zipper of tension, anchoring, shakas, supine decompression breath, big breath in. Good. Exhale, chase that lower abdominal, drawing away from the belt line. Breathe into the rib cage. Float your hands up in front of the heart to your sphere of tension. Give blood with that inner elbow. Chin back. Now in this position, I want you to feel your ribs expanding backwards into the ground. Inflate that space between the shoulders with your breath and keep it there as you exhale. That's the tough parts. Float the hands up a little higher. Feel your ribs expanding backwards. Check in with your anchor. Can you pull those heels into the ground a little bit? Now breathe yourself away from that anchoring tension. As I exhale, I find this lower abdominal tension and I connect it to my anchor. And relax it out. It can be a great way to elongate the spine and decompress it from all this compression we just did while surfing. Let's finish up one last easy 20 to 30% effort, standing decompression breath, big toes together, heels apart, soften the knee, soften the hip, elbows nice and wide, big decompression breath, elongate. Think of your spinal column is a string and you're lifting that string up to the sky and it's anchored at the bottom. Hold big rock melons or cantaloupes in each hand out to the side. It's not pinching back, it's spreading. Breathe into the space between the shoulders. 20, 30% tensions, you're anchoring, you're decompression breathing. Float the pinkies towards each other in front of the nose, sphere of tension. Give blood with the elbows. Slightly pull those hips back just a few centimeters. There's a little more weight in the heels now. That's perfect. Think of elongating from heel to crown of the head. Breathe into that space between the shoulders. Float those hands up. Breathe, pull that bottom rib away from the anchored pelvis and then pull the base of the skull away from the pelvis. One more breath and relax. You should feel tall and long and damn good. Practice it. It is a very different sensory experience. People are used to contractions of muscles, not elongating and lengthening and breathing and connecting. There's a lot of things to think about. You can take foundation training to a lot of other principles. If I'm paddling in the surf, I'm creating some anchoring tension and lengthening the body. Here's the surfboard. I'm lengthening, then lifting. Is my neck relaxed? Am I doing a bit more of a pinky stroke? Things to consider. Practice this, integrate it into your day, and now you're ready to experience the short foundation training workout.